One Piece chapter 1090 is here, and wow, there is a lot to talk about. Tension is rising, characters are on the move, and we are just one moment away for all hell to break loose, and for the war on Egghead Island to begin. My name is JonRossy, and let's talk about chapter 1090, Admiral Kizaru. Before we get into the chapter, we get to see a new reader request of Captain Kuro reading a book with some black cats. I love seeing characters from the early days of One Piece make a return. I actually have a theory on my channel which suggests that the reader requests are actually canon to the story, and that they take place after the story of One Piece. So with that theory in mind, seeing Captain Kuro here is quite the delight. If you're interested in seeing more about my reader request theory, I'll leave a link to the video in the description. Alright, on to the chapter. We start off with Luffy having a conversation with the Gorosei, and I can't believe we're at the point in the story where our crew is finally having their first interaction with potentially the final antagonists of the series, even if that interaction was pretty short. Luffy almost gave away information to the Gorosei, in true Luffy fashion, but Robin stepped in just in time to not allow that to happen. You know, I actually wonder why the Gorosei even asked a question like, who is alive with you in the labo phase right now? In any other situation, you would think that they would say something like, release York and we will not invade, or open the country. Stop having it be closed. If anything, Luffy was the one blackmailing here, telling them to withdraw if they care about York's safety. At first it seemed odd to me that they would ask a question like that, but since this is Luffy we're talking about here, their plan almost worked. Except here's the thing. What if that question was actually not directed at Luffy, but instead was directed to Rob Lucci? A few panels later, we do see Rob Lucci whispering a status report of the situation, so even though Robin had Luffy hang up immediately, in the end, the Marines got the information they needed anyways. It's also crazy that Morgans, Vivi, and Wapol were also listening in on this conversation. You know Morgans is going to turn this into a crazy story, and Vivi's expression was actually really interesting, appearing like she was shocked at what Luffy was saying. Saturn then proceeds to explain the three most important objectives they need to protect: York, Punk Records, and the power plant. Sometimes I think that maybe the Gorosei have a little bit of sympathy, that they could be a little bit better than the Celestial Dragons, especially when Imu ordered them to use the Mother Flame on Lucia. They originally looked worried and saying that innocent people lived there. And there's almost a sliver of morality shown by Saturn here when he replied to Doberman's concern of CP0 and other Cypher Pole agents by saying, I'm just considering the worst possible scenario. But right after that, Saturn does make a comment about how humans are no different from insects. Even if their numbers reduce, they will just multiply again. They truly are ruthless and willing to sacrifice a lot to achieve their objectives. We then cut to the labo phase and see what's going on with the crew. York is trying her best to keep herself from being harmed or killed, even mentioning Ohara in the mix, but Nami was not putting up with her. We do get confirmation that Robin, Kaku, and Stussy are indeed in the room with everyone, with Robin and Kaku fairly bruised up. From Rob Lucci's sneaky report, we do get a confirmation that Shaka and Pythagoras are dead, which is a shame because I was curious to know if we would have gotten a face reveal for Shaka. Also, between the previous chapter and this one, there's been a big emphasis on food, and in these panels, we again see the crew as well as the imprisoned Cypher Pole agents chowing down on some grub. I think it puts into perspective how long the Navy has been surrounding the island, but not engaging in combat. There are war tactics that involve cutting off food supply and starving out the enemy to weaken them. Who do you think would run out of food first, Egghead Island or the Navy? I also love seeing further insight on the bubble technology that Vegapunk has created, now seeing them used as a prison cell for the Seraphim. These bubbles have the properties of sea stone and somehow survive bomb blasts. It would be pretty funny if they still popped from like a needle or something though. Another revelation that was made and that Vegapunk took note of is how some of Hancock's emotions have transferred to S-Snake in the cloning process. As we see here that S-Snake seems to have the exact same infatuation towards Luffy as Hancock does. I also find it really interesting how Jinbei comments on this, but he has barely talked about his own Seraphim. Back in chapter 1069, he had a quick reaction about the Seraphim resembling the old warlords, but has not questioned it since. And here he is standing right next to Vegapunk with the opportunity to question more about his own Seraphim, but only makes a comment on S-Snake. I'm hoping we get more on Jinbei's thoughts about the Seraphim in the future. I'd also like to see the continuation of Sanji fighting S-Shark before we had cut away from Egghead, especially with the interesting dynamic that Sanji seems to hate Jinbei. I'm actually working on a video that will talk about every single one-on-one Straw Hat crew dynamic, including Sanji and Jinbei. If you'd like to see that video when it drops, feel free to subscribe to the channel so you can catch it when it drops. But now, York has done a thing and locked everyone in the labo phase with a a password. I'd like to try to give a few speculations on what the password could be. It could be something extremely complex that only the Vegapunks would be able to figure out, like some kind of chain of numbers and letters or something, but I actually think it could be something extremely simple. Either her favorite food, or something related to her greedy nature, maybe something related to becoming a celestial dragon. So actually looking at it further, in this panel here, York says that the password and the world government are the two armors that protect me, followed by, I'm starting to get hungry. So considering the world government and she's very hungry, I'm going to guess that the password is sausage. Yeah, sausage. Just like what Saturn was eating in the previous chapter. Yeah, I don't know. That'll be my guess. What do you think the password is? Also, this is extremely exciting. Nami mentions her log post hasn't reconfigured yet, though one of them is pointing northeast, where Vegapunk then chimes in and says that the location of Elbaf is in that direction. I honestly feel the same way that Luffy and Usopp do. We've been building up to Elbaf for so long, and it's finally just around the corner. I'm also a fan of their escape plan. Crack the password to bring down the barrier, use Vegaforce 1 to fly and carry the Thousand Sunny as far as it can, then using the coup de burst to blast even further and sail towards Elbaf. I'm anxious to see this plan play out, because you know something is absolutely going to go wrong with this plan. Probably from when the barrier comes down to when Vegaforce 1 flies them through the skies. The Marines could try to shoot them down, Kizaru could easily catch up to them at light speed, assuming that he isn't fully dealt with beforehand, or maybe even Saturn comes out to do something with his unknown powers. I also like how Frankie finally gets to show off in front of Stella, who seems surprised that the ship can fly a full kilometer as well as being powered by cola. Frankie deserves his spotlight in this arc, and I hope he gets to interact with Vegapunk a lot more. Especially with Frankie's new bounty poster, not even showing his face or General Frankie, but showing the Thousand Sunny instead. Oda has used bounty posters to foreshadow plot points in the past, and I absolutely believe that something will come from this soon. Which is an interesting transition, as Frankie does head out to get to the Sunny, alongside Luffy, Bonnie, and Lilith, in order for them to get into position to execute their plan. But before they reach the ship, we cut to a conversation between Saturn and Kizaru, and there's something extremely important that I would like to point out here. Basically, Saturn wants Kizaru to infiltrate the island using his Devil Fruit abilities, but Kizaru pushes back a bit, saying that the one Vegapunk stationed to guard the dome is a friend of mine, and that he wouldn't be able to ignore a man who's determined to fight for his duty. He then goes on to say that if they start the assault, Sentomaru would begin his attack to sink the fleet with their Sea Beast weapons and the Pacifista. Am I crazy to think that the one Vegapunk he mentioned is possibly not Sentomaru? He's technically not a Vegapunk, though he is their bodyguard. The rest of the events that follow seem to make it obvious that it is Sentomaru, especially once Kizaru does begin his assault and heads straight towards him and saying to prepare himself. I just thought it was odd to use the wording, that one Vegapunk. But in hindsight, would Kizaru really have a connection with like Atlas or Edison? I'm probably just overthinking it here. But here we are. Everything is about to go down. Kizaru and Sentomaru make their clash. Sentomaru orders his units to attack. The Vice Admirals are rallying up to begin the assault as well. And with the final panel of Luffy's face using his observation haki to sense the presence of Kizaru. I'm so ready for all of this to go down. But what did you think of the chapter? Leave a comment below and let me know. I'm actually doing a series of videos that I'm currently calling chapter poems, where I take the latest chapters and make a poem out of them, with some editing and original music. I made my first poem for chapter 1089 that I think turned out really great. If you haven't seen it yet, feel free to go check it out. I'm trying to put out different types of content that I haven't seen other One Piece YouTubers do, or put my own twist on something like character rankings, but I use a musical tier list and make a song with those rankings. You can find a playlist of my daily character rankings with a musical tier list here on my channel and in the description as well. And if any of that sounds intriguing to you, consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching. My name is JonRossy, and I leave you with a dawn.